status very simply and easily if there's someone who questions it, so a doctor in an emergency room or something like that. And the second thing is that it provides a symbolic recognition that the state accepts that relationship.
But it does nothing more for the legality of the relationship?
No extra rights at all, from what I understand.
OK. How does one register?
If it's going to be similar to the Tasmanian system, then you go down to the Births, Deaths and Marriages Registry and fill in a form. I'm afraid it's not very romantic.
So basically it is just to prove that there is a couple. So besides being symbolic, though, it's got to have a little bit more to it, does it not? Well,
it's a proof of status as a couple. Yeah.
Now, Anthony, from your point of view, we met some 15, 16 months ago. Just give us a snapshot of your life and how you view this and what it would have done to you perhaps 30 years ago.
Well, you know, for me, I was in a religious situation, and of course, in that situation, I was given the belief that I was an abomination because I was gay, which sent me on a course of getting married, and I had been married for 16 years, but then realising I have to be true to myself coming out. And so, you know, looking at this particular situation with same-sex relationships, I have lots of friends, Kerri-Anne, which are in long-term relationships. And I find it very sad that people don't treat them the same as with heterosexuals, because, you know, the thing that keeps their relationship together is the same as what keeps a heterosexual relationship together. It's love, it's trust, it's respect, it's commitment. And that should be acknowledged, I think.
Indeed. So this register in Victoria, what would it mean?
It will mean that the relationships which already exist are being validated. You know, at the moment, in many situations, they're being ignored or treated as not being real, and being second class. But it's good to get that acknowledgement. I know overseas, friends that I have that have had ceremonies, you know, and civil union ceremonies that have been together for 15 to 20 years. It's such a moving experience for them to acknowledge that love and commitment in front of friends and family.
Now, this law will not come into being till the end of the year?
They're saying they'll introduce it at the end of the year, but its operation may be delayed a little.
You mentioned Tasmania. Just fill us in on Tasmania, New South Wales and Queensland. OK.
All the other states and territories in Australia have recognition for same-sex couples as de facto relationships. New South Wales was the first in 1999. South Australia was the last in December last year. When Tasmania introduced their changes in 2003, they had de facto recognition, but they also included this register idea. So you have all the rights just by being a committed couple, but if you want to go that extra step and sign an official document, you can do that as well. So that's what I understand the system's modelled on.
So it doesn't recognise a legal marriage, but it does recognise there is a relationship. So the important steps here, as you mentioned, if you're in hospital and have to make a decision, you can, by legal relationship, make that decision.
Yes, and you could already, but the certificate means that you might have less of a fight about it. You might have less difficulty in proving your right to do that.
Are we then waiting for South Australia, Western Australia, Queensland and New South Wales to follow suit with what will be in Tasmania and what is in Tasmania and will be in Victoria?
Look, I think that's a rather messy way to do it, actually, to have all the states have their own registers, and then when you move from one state to another, you would have to re-register, and, you know, there's no uniformity. So I think the logical next step would probably be a federal civil union scheme.
When the Vatican this week has labelled gay marriages evil, how does that make gay people feel?
I don't think the people that make those sort of statements, Kerri-Anne, I'm sure they actually don't know any gay or lesbian people or any gay and lesbian couples, because if they did, they would realise how hurtful that is to make those sort of statements.
Yeah, I mean, it was very strong. The second highest ranking official in the Vatican comes out and makes these statements. That, you know, they also included abortion and euthanasia. Euthanasia they termed terrorism with a human face.
35% of Catholics, only 35% of Catholics believe that homosexuality is immoral. So obviously the Vatican is out of step with what the people believe in the pews.
Indeed. OK, we'd like to continue this discussion. We're going to introduce the President of the Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission to add to the discussion this morning. So if you wouldn't mind staying with us, we'll be back after this.
Did you know that true love lasts for nothing? Her acceptance is the way.
We're talking about the rights for same-sex couples in Australia with Jenni Millbank and also Anthony Venn-Brown. And to explain the federal government's position, Graeme Innes, the Human Rights Commissioner. And welcome to the program, Graeme.
Good morning. Thanks, Kerri.
At a federal level, what will this register with Victoria, which will happen by the end of the year, what will it mean federally?
Well, it won't mean anything federally unless federal laws change. The federal government could either adopt the register in the states where it exists or work towards the development of a federal scheme. But at the moment it won't have an effect on the 60 or so federal laws which currently discriminate against gay and lesbian couples.
So let's talk about those 60 laws. That's a whole bunch of laws that contribute to discrimination.
It is. My commission's been conducting an inquiry for almost 12 months now, and we've discovered laws in the area of superannuation, veterans' entitlements, social security, tax, a whole raft of aged care laws, all of which treat couples, same-sex couples, differently to opposite-sex couples.
Well, Jenni, we already discussed that it would make so much more sense if we had a federal approach to this. I mean, how far off would you imagine this to be? And what are the stumbling? What's the hurdle?
Look, I don't think there are that many hurdles, legally speaking. I think there are probably hurdles, politically speaking. But I think it's pretty simple. The federal government could do two things.
So legally, it's a piece of cake?
To introduce de facto rights, piece of cake, federally, and a civil union scheme would require some constitutional basis, which might be a bit more difficult, but it could be done. Okay,
politically then, Graeme, what are the hurdles?
Well, both the Prime Minister and the Attorney-General have indicated that they are opposed to discrimination against people on the basis of their sexual orientation, and that they will, on a case-by-case basis, look at the discrimination which takes place. So my inquiry is auditing that discrimination, and it's also gathering together the stories of people who are affected by this discrimination, because we're not just talking about theoretical laws here, Kerri-Anne, we're actually talking about couples who are disadvantaged because laws apply to them differently, and we'll be making recommendations to government as to how they can rectify that situation.
There was an issue just discussed this week. There was a 20-year relationship. A guy who cared for his war veteran partner, he's now denied a pension, a benefit. So what's the latest here?
Well, yes, he looked after his partner, who was a war veteran for almost 20 years, cared for him at home so that his partner didn't have to go into a hospital for veterans. And sadly, that man died, and Giro was offered the veteran's widow's pension, but the letter was addressed to him as Ms, and when he drew to the attention of the department that he was a man, not a woman, in other words, that he was in a same-sex relationship, that pension was taken away.
So where does it go now?
He has unsuccessfully been to the department and to government, and he's now lodged a complaint with the United Nations Human Rights Commission, and that will be heard over the next 18 months, 2 years or so.
As we bring this issue together, what is the best state in Australia to live in if you're a same-sex couple?
I think you'd probably have to ask all the same-sex couples that, but my vote would be for the ACT.
Speaking,
the ACT, I think, has probably got the most progressive laws at this point. Because
what is available to same-sex couples in the ACT compared to other states?
There's de facto recognition, there is wide-ranging parenting rights, there is access to adoption rights, and they also have the most progressive surrogacy regulation regime in Australia. And
those are not available in most other states?
Western Australia would be the closest second.
So the registration and these sort of issues, how far away, Anthony? I mean, you're working in this area all the time. How far away do you think we are as a community?
Well, when we look at other movements, equality movements, sometimes it's been between 40 to 70 years before when it commenced to when it actually came law. So we may have another 10 years, we may have another 15. I wish I had a crystal ball, but we do know eventually that it will happen.
Graeme, what would you imagine?
It's hard to put a figure on it. I'm a bit more optimistic than that, than Anthony, I think, but it will happen. because Australia is a fair community, and we now don't discriminate against people on the grounds of their race, on the grounds of their gender, and the laws will change so that we no longer discriminate against people on the grounds of their sexual orientation.
Well, Graeme, Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission, thank you for your time. Also, Jenny, our lawyer representative here this morning, and Anthony, it's lovely to see you again.
Thanks, Kerri.
We've got a lot more coming up on the program. Here's Roz.